The Florida Panthers win yet another overtime game, their second straight, this time in comeback fashion. We're going to discuss how the Florida Panthers did it, how they came back, and how the Florida Panthers have benefited through 1-goal games.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to every day who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And you could subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And we are once again doing our giveaway, which will be announced this Friday, for your chance to win this hat with the Florida Panthers logo, Amerant Bank on the side, and the lettering on the back saying the official bank of the Florida Panthers. All you have to do is submit your entry of your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and submit it via DM at Monoman12 at LO_FLA Panthers on Instagram and on X as well. So the Florida Panthers, they come out with a 4-3 overtime victory against the Washington Capitals on the road. A quick one-game road trip before the Florida Panthers come back home and face the Carolina Hurricanes. The Florida Panthers, they go out to a 1-0 deficit, score 2 straight. The Florida Panthers have a little bit of a when it comes to the second period, they continue their woes through the second period. But the Florida Panthers, first game this season where they win when trailing after the second period. Evan Rodrigues gets the game-tying goal, and then 15 seconds into overtime, the Florida Panthers win it. Sam Reinhart scoring his 9th goal of the season, an overtime winner, second straight overtime winner. And on today's show, to break down this overtime win for the Florida Panthers, this is a big week of new guests debuting on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We had one Pedersen earlier this week and TJ Pedersen of Panther Prairie, but today we are bringing in Rod Pedersen, one of the co-hosts of the Cats and Bolts podcast, a podcast talking about the NHL in the state of Florida with the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Rod, thank you so much for coming on to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, my friend. Oh, hold on. Let me unmute you. Hold on.
There you go. You're good. Hey, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Always a fun day to talk hockey, especially after a Panthers win like this.
Yeah, once again, second straight overtime win that the Panthers had in this week. You know, blowing that 3-0 lead to the Columbus Blue Jackets, but this time it was the Panthers itching and scratching and clawing in this one. And I'm sure the TNT guys are definitely happy about that, especially with all the meow noises that they were making during the intermissions and commercial breaks and all that stuff. But it's funny because when you think about the Florida Panthers and what they did in the first period and all, like a little bit of like getting their legs going, it took a little bit. In the first 10 minutes, it looks like that the Washington Capitals were not the older team. It felt like the Florida Panthers were. As far as getting their odd man rushes, OEL was great to start, and it's crazy because because even with their 21 shot attempts for the Washington Capitals in the first period, none of them were getting to the blue paint, and then unlucky bounces here and there. The shot by Anthony Mantha deflects off of Anton Lundell, but then what we saw with the Florida Panthers, with not allowing the center of the ice once again for the Washington Capitals. I mean, when you think of all 3 goals the Washington Capitals had, it was mostly off breakaways and quick zone entries and all. And the one goal that they did have when they were on the doorstep, it was called back to an offside. John Conjemi once again being successful on challenges, taking that Sonny Milano goal away, which we could have argued that could have been a trip on Tom Wilson on Eetu Luostarinen in the corner. But Rod, how did you like how the Panthers adjusted from the beginning of the first towards the end?
Well, I mean, it was a slow start for them. I think they only had 2 shots 10 minutes into the game. So I was with you, and I said it took them a while to find their legs, but eventually they did. And you talk about the way the goals were scored. It was an odd night for the way the goals were scored, especially those against Bob. I think the first one was the knuckleballer. Yeah, the one that went between his legs. And then the second goal was a breakaway goal that went literally right through him. But overall, I thought he had a really good game. I mean, there wasn't a lot of special teams. They did not allow Ovechkin to get teed up. He did get his shots. But, Maurice, the 10-game mark, which was coming off that road trip, he said, it's the best defense the team's ever played in his time there. So you're used to them not giving up great opportunities and shots and that. But I think it was a while. I'm sitting there watching this going, I have no idea this is going to turn out. The goals were, like I say, odd for both teams. But you know what? It was a very entertaining game.
Yeah, no doubt. And you think about when you talked about the Florida Panthers keeping Alex Ovechkin at bay. His only 2 shots came on that last power play that the Washington Capitals had, one on a one-timer and then one on that he had on the wrist there that Bob was staying down low and all. And even some of the stops that Bob had. I mean, one where he was way to his left, pad stack, gets the poke check off Tom Wilson. Maybe probably the best moment of the game. We'll get more into that in segment number 2 of that. But also when you think about when we think about how the goals were given up, you think about, okay, this is unlike the Florida Panthers, at least through the first 10 games. You spoke about Maurice's comments and all. And even Maurice spoke to Tarek El-Bashir in between after the first goal. It's like, oh, I'll try my best to get into their heads. Some paraphrasing those words, which is a little bit of a funny comment from the head coach. Gave up a shorthanded goal. There's still 5 power play goals to 2 shorthanded goals. So still a little bit of an issue on special teams, but hoping to be better with the reinforcements and all. But even on the first PK for the Florida Panthers, they were forcing the Washington Capitals into one and dones and all that. And 4 out of the last 6 games for the Florida Panthers, not giving up a power play goal. So that's a little bit of an encouraging sign, despite the shorthanded goal that they gave up, which Mike Riley, maybe could have made a better decision there. But also Mike Riley also got 4 shots on goal. So it wasn't the worst game, in my opinion, for Mike Riley.
No, not at all. And you know what coaches call moments like that are teachable moments. So teachable moments for Paul Maurice and teachable moments for Mike Riley. They didn't have a lot of power plays, as I mentioned. But when they did, it was 4-by-1, 4 forwards and 1 defenseman. Just so happened Mike Riley was that 1 defenseman for part of it. OEL started the power play, and I thought Oliver Ekman-Larsson's probably the best offseason pickup by this team. So there's a lot of options there on the power play. Mike Riley had his chance, coughed up as the last man. Nobody more upset about that than Mike Riley. So, yeah, I'll be honest with you, Armando, I thought they're working incredibly hard tonight. If they come out of this with a point, i.e. an overtime loss or a shootout loss on the road, I think they'd be pretty happy. And lo and behold, they get 2 points with a goal 15 seconds into overtime. So to be honest with you, I would think the Panthers are pretty happy with the way this game went down.
Oh, no doubt. And you think about how the Panthers are, whenever it came to the Washington Capitals having a lead, it wasn't like the Washington Capitals had it for long as well. I mean, you think about how it's just over the lead that the Washington Capitals had was only for 2 minutes and 7 seconds right before Oliver Ekman-Larsson scored on the goal where Matthew Tkachuk fakes the wraparound, gets it to Oliver Ekman-Larsson and scores from the point as well. And even when the Washington Capitals took the lead going into the third period, the Panthers really mostly in the beginning of the third period they get a goal within. I'm looking up the time once again for the Panthers when they tied with this one. Bear with me here.
Mm-hmm.
They score that goal 3 minutes and 33 seconds in, so 8 minutes in between goals. So the Panthers are still in it. They are forechecking, they're protecting the middle of the ice and all. So that and then when you think about how the generating of the speed of the neutral zone that the Florida Panthers have had, especially that top line, each player on that top line had 2 points on the night. Everyone had 1 goal and an assist and all. So and credit to the top pair too. Everyone from the who got the big minutes stepped up. Forsling on that cross ice feed to Evan Rodrigues as well. That stretch pass that Evan Rodrigues had to bark off, and then Reinhart on the game winner. Everybody was just in sync, getting it tape to tape as well. And even with when the Washington Capitals had their cycle chances, I didn't feel that Bobrovsky was really challenged too much as far as outside shots. I felt like he had so much time to read his saves.
I think you said you were watching the TNT broadcast. I think that's where I saw it, although it might have been on social media. Just with the Panthers are number 1 in the NHL for fewest shots against or slot shots against. I mean, I don't get into the analytics like a lot of people, and maybe you do, but what it does tell me is they have locked down, pardon the pun for the name of the show that we're on, but locked down the area in front of their net. As a matter of fact, shortly after they showed that, I'm like, you guys can play in the offensive zone too. You can go after it. And shortly after that, they scored. So, you said segment, we'll talk about the second period. They've had an issue with playing 60 minutes. We saw that the other night against Columbus, right? And they came back on comeback Cats. Yeah. Hashtag comeback Cats again tonight, So it's November, man. They got a lot of lessons to learn, a lot of time to do it.
Yeah, and the fact that there's still lessons to learn and they're still getting W's and 2 points, 7-4-1, going back home right before their California trip, it's definitely very encouraging to see for sure. But we are going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss our 3 stars of the game, which I don't think this one should be a hard one tonight as far as our 3 stars. And we are going to talk about the moment when we thought this game was won or lost. In this case, won. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. And we spent a lot of time talking together. You and I, we get fired up together on wins and losses. Who starts, who sits. And for that connection, we want our chat to be a little bit more personal. We just learned more about, with Jace Medical, some of the ED medications. You realize what that means. Bring on the extended travel, bring on the next natural disaster or supply chain issues. You are covered, my friend. You don't need to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics or Cialis, Viagra, Revaltio prescription, and it's possible because of our friends at Jace Medical. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on our daily medication. Remember to use that promo code Locked On at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace. I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I order mostly my daily meds with a year's supply. I also order antibiotics. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. Close quote. If you or someone you love would like some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see what it's offered for you. Remember to use that promo code Locked On for $20 off your purchase. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. I am with Rod Pedersen, one of the 2 co-hosts of the Cats and Bolts podcast, a podcast talking about the NHL in the state of Florida between the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Rod, this one is we've done 12 post. I've done 12 post-game shows now and discussing 3 stars of the game. For me, tonight has been probably the easiest one as far as my list for 3 stars of the game. And it's got to go to everyone on the top line. Number 1, Sam Reinhart with the GWG, his 9th of the season, playing so well in a contract year as well. Barkov is my 2nd star with that wicked of a one-timer shot that was assisted by Sam Reinhart on that backhand feed from the corner. And then Evan Rodrigues coming in clutch with the game tying goal in the 3rd period, and then having that stretch pass after the Florida Panthers win a faceoff 15 seconds into overtime and all. And I got to give some honorable mentions here. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, even though on the shorthanded goal, you're questioning whether you should go more towards the left or stay in the middle. Not going to put too much of that on OEL, but got the first goal of the game. And then Gus Forsling as well. That man has grown so much in the years that after he's been claimed off of waivers, and he's in a contract year as well. So many players performing, trying to get a new deal as well. But for you, who are your 3 stars of the game for this 4-3 overtime victory for the Florida Panthers over the Washington Capitals?
Has to be all Panthers, or can I pick a Capital?
You can pick a Capital if you want.
I'm going to go with a 3rd star. See, in the building in Washington, they went with Oliver Ekman-Larsson with a 3rd star. I'm just sitting here looking at the stat sheet. I think I might cheat and go with theirs. OEL scored the first goal of the game, got the party going for the Panthers after a slow start. Again, a veteran presence on the blue line. I like OEL. Anthony, close to a Gordie Howe hat trick. 2 goals and a puck. Were you worried about him when he took that shot to the face in the 3rd period? Did you see him go down and was leaking? That was a scary incident, given what happened with injuries.
That was a little bit scary seeing. I mean, you see how the Panthers were really starting to get it starting to eat pucks, and that was a puck that was deflected off of Mike Riley's stick, which is why I wanted to say once again that I didn't think Mike Riley had the worst of games despite that turnover and a very uncharacteristic penalty. I forgot who he shoved into the net. I believe it was Connor McMichael. It was, but yeah, scary moment for Anthony Mantha. Doesn't come back the rest of the game after that shot to the face as well. But getting 2 goals on the night, even though one was redirected off of Anton Lundell, definitely worthy of a star of the game for Anthony Mantha. And he's a guy trying to prove himself after a trade from the Detroit Red Wings as well, and a team that's really trying to get through from a lot of cap crunches and lack of assets as well. As far as when we thought this game was won or lost, the moment for me was the moment that Gus Forsling had that beauty of a stretch pass to Evan Rodrigues for that game tying goal in the 3rd period. That was my moment where I thought that the Florida Panthers were starting to gain that momentum for a win. And also, let's not forget, the Kulikov had a nice little strip on Matthew Phillips, and then he goes on a breakaway, and William Lockwood is there trailing for a possible rebound opportunity as well. And Verhaeghe and Steven Lorentz a little bit later were starting to get there, and there was a shift where Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe were on the ice for 2+ minutes in their offensive zone. They were getting their changes necessary when they put pucks in deep. I've talked so much about shot suppression as well for the Panthers, because the puck is in their end so much that it's really helping when it comes to the getting changes in their zone. So it's been just so beneficial for the Florida Panthers of how they've done this. For you, when did you think this game was won or lost for the Panthers? In this case, won.
You know what? You brought it up. I thought it was penalty by Riley in the 3rd period was going to cost them the game. Correct me if I'm mistaken. I think it was 3-3 at the time, and it wasn't a good penalty to take. The way I was looking at it, Armando, what are you cross-checking him from behind for at the side of the net when he's whacking away at Bob? Why is that forward in between you and the net as the defenseman? So I'm like, this was after the whistle, dumb penalty to take. I'm like, this is not a good penalty to take on the road in a tied game, but the Panthers ended up killing it. So I'll tell you what, I didn't think that the game was won. I was saying, if they came out of this with a point, I'd be happy with their effort and the mistakes that they made. And 15 seconds into overtime, I barely sat down and it was over. I don't think the Capitals were ready. I didn't see that coming. So I thought it was lost on that penalty. How's that?
Yeah. You could definitely argue that for that. When you think about how when you see the opposition being careless when it comes to after the whistle, like you mentioned, oh, that's your time when you're like maybe slobbering and thinking, okay, they haven't been able. The Capitals, they know that they've been struggling to score. Alex Ovechkin didn't have like we mentioned earlier, didn't have a shot on goal before that, and they were feeding him. And then that save that Bob had, where Bob had it, he lifts his left arm a little bit. That's going under his armpit and possibly in. And then how Bob was able to secure that one timer off of Alexander Ovechkin on it. That's definitely one that you're thinking, whew. And once again, I gotta mention once again that when he was pad stacked and got that poke out of Tom Wilson, that was just another just great moment of Bob just having instincts, because you think about it, if he misses that poke, the Panthers could be in trouble. You might see Tom Wilson's handling the puck a little bit and then going top shelf, and then Bob having no chance, even if he lifts the left leg a little bit as well. So definitely a game where you know I never thought it was dominated by
No.
the Panthers didn't go like 5 or 6 straight shots consecutively at one point in this one. The Capitals at times did, but it wasn't just tilting the ice for a long period of time versus another. So I felt like this was a pretty equally matched game on the night.
Oh, it was even after Panthers their legs. It was even the rest of the way. But it's just funny you talk about that power play and the saves that Bob made on Ovi when he teed it up from the left faceoff dot and put it right at Bob. I'm like, my God, he's gonna put it right through him. I don't know what's Ovi 38, 39. I'm like, I think he's could be free this year. I mean, he's still got the shot. And to be honest, Armando, I considered giving Bob a star. He had 25 saves on the night. Pretty good night. There was a couple goals he'd like to have back. I told the knuckleballers, they're tough to stop. I was a goalie. No. Yeah, so honorable mention for Bob for getting the win. And on that power play or penalty kill from the Panthers' perspective, he might have saved them the game.
Yeah, no doubt. And once again, 4 out of the last 6 games, no power play goals for the Panthers. So that definitely a good sign for the Panthers, as they are once again, this is the period of time where they're just getting through with all the injuries that they have on their roster, and they're winning some games as well. So that definitely a good sign. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss a stat that the TNT broadcast discussed about 1-goal games, how the Florida Panthers are benefiting, and how it once again fit in tonight's matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals. We're going to discuss this and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Parkview Advance. And as a business owner, you realize that there are times when receivables might fall behind, but that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital from $5,000 to $1.5 million. Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It's a much easier process than you might imagine. We invite as many entrepreneurs that are Locked On NHL fans to learn more by calling us at 203-675-0071 or go to parkviewadvance.com. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping business owners with their working capitals. Go to parkviewadvance.com. Third and final segment here on this Thursday, November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. I am with Rod Pedersen, one of the 2 co-hosts of the Cats and Bolts podcast, a podcast discussing the state of Florida when it comes to the NHL. And Rod, you think about when it comes to the Florida Panthers, the TNT broadcast mentioned that they have played the second most 1-goal games in this young season. And you see it, you even see it with the goal differential, which I'm gonna try to see if the NHL app has it updated, which I'm not very pleased about the newest update. It's right at 0, actually. Their goal differential is right at 0 on the season. And you got to think about with a blowout against the Winnipeg Jets early on in the season, and even falling behind with a 2-0 loss in opening night. Took a little bit of a while to get it going and all, even though the deserve a win-o-meter probably says that they could have won against the Minnesota Wild on opening night. But still, you think about how this team has grown and taking that experience from the Stanley Cup final to this, bringing in guys. I had a question yesterday about worries about Evan Rodrigues, and look what happens today. He has a goal right on the doorstep and has that stretch pass, like we mentioned already in this show and all. But how do you view not only how the Panthers have played in 1-goal games and being ready, but also the mindset of possibly what Paul Maurice, the messaging to his guys when it comes to these close games?
Well, I've been working in the game of hockey for 30 years, and I've seen teams that have come out on top in 1-goal games and a lot of teams that have lost 1-goal games. The Calgary Flames missed the playoffs on the basis of losing 1-goal games last year. It is, I think a lot of it, some of it has to obviously with Paul Maurice's influence, there's no doubt. But what I really think is this is a Florida team, and how long you been covering them, Armando?
4 seasons.
Yeah, well, then you've been around to see the playoff losses to Tampa Bay a couple ago. Obviously, the Stanley Cup run last year. They've learned some tough lessons. The core is here. Tkachuk was here for that run last year. Barkov's been here for all of it. These guys know what it takes in close games. It doesn't matter if it's the playoffs or it's regular season. They're a veteran team now. They're not young. I mean, and to be honest, they still got a lot of reinforcements coming back, as you know. Ekblad, Montour, Sam Bennett. These guys have been through the wars too. To be honest, to sit back and look at their record right now without those guys is nothing short of spectacular. I just think it's an older group that doesn't need to be shown the ropes. They've been on the other end of these 1-goal games. It's been a while. They don't call them the comeback cats for no reason. But they just know what it takes in games because they've been through the wars together. That would be my answer to that question.
All right, so I'm coming up with this question on the fly because of just what the answer you gave me. Right now, I think for the Jack Adams, I think the top guy is Rick Tocchet in Vancouver right now, in my opinion. But with the Florida Panthers navigating these injuries and still having the record that they have at 7-4-1, and right now, second best points percentage in the Atlantic. They have a game in hand on the Tampa Bay Lightning, 1 point behind right now. Do you think that what the Panthers are doing in this early in the season, even though Montour and Ekblad are hopefully coming back earlier than expected, do you think that's enough of something that could help Paul Maurice win the Jack Adams or even some consideration?
Yeah, he's done a remarkable job. We've debated this because, as you mentioned, we talked about the Lightning on our podcast too, and we think, what does it take to win the Jack Adams? And Serena has said, remarkable job of coaching. John Cooper's won it. Guy that's won 2 Stanley Cups. You think about that. John Cooper's never won the Jack Adams as Coach of the Year. Jim Montgomery in Boston won it because he did an outstanding job setting a regular season record for points. He did a great job, and it doesn't factor in the playoffs. So John Cooper might be in the running this year, not just Paul Maurice. Look at what Lightning are doing without Andre Vasilevsky. Nobody expected that. Right. Paul Maurice has done an outstanding job, and you've been around this year watching this team and just seeing what Paul Maurice has done in terms of defensive zone play. It's not just Paul. He's got an almost entirely new D-core up to a 7-4-1 start and leading the NHL in all those defensive categories. So I I got to give a lot of credit to the players. There's an old adage, it's a football line, because I spent a lot of time in football too. Players win and coaches lose, i.e. players get the credit when you win. Players get the credit when you win. Coaches get the blame when you lose. But in this case, I think the players have done a really good job of it. Paul's the reason for that.
Yeah, and doing, and taking this summer to watch the tape of the players, and you would think that when you box score watch a player like Niko Mikkola only having 3 goals in a season and all, but then when you watch him on the ice and you see the eye test for Niko Mikkola, what he does in the offensive zone, pinches and all that, and all that as well. It just goes to show the consistent studying that they have done for these free agents. Yeah, they're familiar with Kulikov, played under Paul Maurice, and some of the teammates, Aaron Ekblad and Sasha Barkov specifically, who have played with them as well. And then low risk, high reward of Mike Riley bought out and an opportunity for that competition as well for the Panthers. And like we've mentioned, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, bad situations and 2 multiple stops. When you think that it's the play suffers from 2 different stops, you start to think it's the player, which some of it is. That's not what I'm not trying to say that that there hasn't been poor play from OEL, but then you think about the opportunity to be in a different situation. There's not a lot of pressure on these defensemen as well. So it's kind of like they're playing loose, and you don't have and all. And it really helps for these guys to better their play. You're not overthinking on a stretch. You know that there is support whenever you're battling in the corners as well, to circle, or when you're breaking out, the opportunity to circle it back to your defenseman if you have multiple guys getting up to you on the half walls as well. So I think if you would have told me 7-4-1 through 12 games, I'm telling you, before game 1 against Minnesota Wild, I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm coming back for a homestand. They're in really good shape. I'll just say this for Ekman-Larsson. I was in Arizona when he was there, and although the team was bad, he was perennially an all-star. He was by far the best player on a bad team. And in Vancouver, everybody was bad. So I don't put that on OEL. When they signed him to this deal in the offseason, I'm like, that is going to be a key signing right there. So it kind of goes back to what I said about this not being a young team anymore. It's an older team. And I think that's the reason why, again, when the team needed a lift, when they were skating in quicksand a bit tonight, OEL scores from the point and gets it going, and they never really look back. So, yeah.
So, and definitely that veteran presence helps, and all the guys who got on the board, they're all guys in late 20s as well, early 30s. The guys who are the stars were the stars tonight. That's the theme. That was the name of the game tonight in Washington DC from Capital One Arena. But Rod, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this post-game edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers come out with a 4-3 overtime win over the Washington Capitals. And not even to mention, Barkov has a point in 11 straight games against the Washington Capitals. So not a Southeast Division matchup for these guys anymore, but still great to see whenever the Florida Panthers do face off against Washington. So, Rod, thank you once again. And tell everybody not only where they can follow you, but more about what you do, even though we discussed it a lot on this show.
Well, I appreciate it, Armando. The Cats and Bolts podcast. So YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're new to it. We've only done 7 episodes. But I have a show on television in Canada. It airs daily on Game Plus TV. It airs noon to 2 live daily. And we talk a lot of NHL, a little NFL, and Canadian Football League because it's in Canada. It's the Rod Pedersen Show on Game Plus television daily. And it's actually on the radio in Atlanta too. Oddly enough, WQEE radio, we're referred to as Atlanta's NHL show. So we talk a lot of hockey, and it's been a lot of fun being on with you, man. I should have said hi to you in the press box when I saw you a few games ago. Next time I will, in person.
Oh.
But thanks for having me on tonight.
Yes. Now with a familiar faces, it's definitely a hello in the press box for sure. So
For sure.
thank you so much, Rod. And I will I will definitely see you again soon, my friend.
Sounds good. Thank you, Armando.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every day is make sure you come back for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, as it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nick Fairbanks will be back as we will be previewing the Florida Panthers versus the Carolina Hurricanes from Amerant Bank Arena. So I'm Armando Velez with Rod Pedersen, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.